Brody Hawke hunkered down in the mire of silt and reeds lining the bank of the river. He'd been in this muddy tributary of the Amazon for nearly 8 hours, and he was so bored he could hardly concentrate.
"Get a grip,"
he muttered under his breath.
"A wandering mind is as deadly as a bullet."
Brody forced himself to watch the traffic on the river for the boatload of terrorists their informants claimed were coming here. A variety of watercraft chugged by him, and each time he hid, dropping under the water and holding his breath until the boat went by. Hours passed, 1 long minute at a time, without any sign of the terrorists. Brody cursed, wondering if all this waiting would make him lose his edge. He thrived on action, danger. Waiting day after day wasn't his style, but he supposed it came with the territory. So far, his missions had been fast-paced. This time was different, and he'd damned well better adjust his mindset. He went off duty, saying, "Catch you later," to the man who relieved him. Like a panther, he silently and quickly stole his way between shacks built along the riverbank. Finally, he reached the lean-to they used as a safe house. The ceiling in the grass shack wasn't high enough for him to stand up straight. He bent over and peeled off his wetsuit. As he stripped, he noticed the letter on his cot. He stared down at the envelope and wondered who would write him. His mother was dead, and he had no close relatives. The return address on the typewritten envelope wasn't the least bit familiar. St. Helena, California. He didn't know anyone in California. Hell, he hadn't been in that crazy state except for the 6 months he'd spent in San Diego for SEAL training. Who would be sending him a letter? He ripped the envelope open and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. The letter had been written on a computer, he noticed. He read the opening line, then dropped onto the cot, dazed. "Dear son." He scanned the first page of the letter from the man who claimed to be his father. The poor bastard was certifiable, Brody assured himself. His father had died in an automobile accident when Brody had been 3. "Yo, Hawke, you're losing it." Brody looked up and saw another SEAL had entered the hut. He hadn't heard him come in. Ciudad del Este was a haven for terrorists, drug lords, and every other kind of criminal. Letting his guard down was crazy. Jake Wilder shrugged out of his sweat-soaked t-shirt, then used it to wipe off the charcoal smudged on his face for camouflage. "What you got there?" Jake asked. "A love letter from your main squeeze?" "Nah, it's from some nut." Brody flipped over the second page without reading it, intending to wad up the letter and toss it into the corner with the rest of the trash. A photograph taped to the back page caught his eye. "Son of a bitch," he cursed between clenched teeth. Jake leaned over his shoulder and looked at the picture too. "Hey, you can be hosed off and taken out in public, Hawke. Who'd have guessed?" Brody was too stunned to respond to Jake's ribbing. The man in the photograph could have been Brody, except he wasn't. He had the same thick, dark hair, angular jaw, and cleft chin, the same piercing blue eyes beneath straight brows. The shot showed the man from the shoulders up, making it impossible to know if he was 6'3". Judging from the breadth of his shoulders, Brody assumed the man was that tall, maybe taller. "Wait a minute." Jake pointed at the man's right eyebrow. "That isn't you. He doesn't have a scar." Brody reached up and touched his eyebrow. He vividly recalled the fight, even though it had been more than 20 years ago. He'd been 7 at the time, and terrified of the school bully. Because he was slight and small for his age, Brody had been easy to pick on. He knew if he didn't stand up for himself, he would go through life an underdog, a punching bag for every bully. He hadn't won the fight, but he'd held his own and came away with nothing more than a cut above his eye that had gushed blood. A badge of courage, and a rite of passage, even though he'd been very young.